are integral components of a larger ecosystem supporting the primary cities around it. So why Kuala Kangsar? Based on Malaysia's third national communications to UNFCCC, Perak State in Malaysia will see a 9% average increase in flooding events in flood-prone areas by 2050. Kuala Kangsar, Malaysia's royal town and a district within Perak State, is in a low-lying flood-prone area and at the downstream of Sungai Perak. Like many other districts in Malaysia, Kuala Kangsar faces hazards such as floods and landslides due to its geographical location, and the relationship between hazard, risk, exposure, and vulnerabilities significantly influences the local communities. Yayasan Hasanah, a foundation of Khazanah Nasional, Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund, is an independent grant-making foundation that fosters collaboration with policymakers, social purpose organizations, corporations, and communities to address critical issues, prioritizing lasting impact and sustainability. In 2022, Hasanah awarded slightly over 100,000 US dollars to Ting City, which is about 500,000 ringgit, to conduct a climate resilience baseline study in Kuala Kangsar to look at the development of a climate resilience framework for Kuala Kangsar with site-specific strategies for all 9 districts in terms of gaps, opportunities, and priorities in the areas of climate adaptation and disaster risk management. Second, in improving the vulnerable community preparedness and enhancing their resiliency through the implementation of a comprehensive disaster preparedness structure and the enhancement of the royal town's landscape for public comfort and green and greater tourism. And third, developing a strategic framework with site-specific strategies for all 9 districts or MUKIMs in Kuala Kangsar, based on their levels of risk, vulnerability, and community preparedness. As part of Hasanah's environment work track in catalyzing and enabling solutions for sustainable development across Malaysia, we have committed to focus our catalytic innovations in the state of Perak, where we are currently supporting 22 projects through our grants since 2020, worth more than 32 million ringgit, spanning across 5 strategic thrusts and 8 priority locations in Perak. The 5 strategic thrusts are transitioning to a green economy, empowering local communities, protecting nature, building climate resilience, and building inclusive governance. And the 8 priority locations covers various ecosystems such as the marine ecosystem, freshwater, forests and mountains, coastal and mangroves. As a convener, collaborator, and catalyst of change, Hasanah's work in the state of Perak, and specifically Kuala Kangsar, is aimed at demonstrating viable climate mitigation and adaptation models in the country. So we hope that through this long-term partnership with Ting City, we will look to specifically deliver 5 strategic outcomes. One is enhancing the climate resilience in urban planning and development for Kuala Kangsar, implementing a comprehensive disaster preparedness structure, strategy, and action plan, which includes, among others, early warning systems, effective waste management systems, and improving Kuala Kangsar's landscape for public comfort and greater tourism. Third, a grants program to catalyze innovative ideas from the community. Fourth, a public realm improvement and space activation to improve and upgrade public spaces for inclusivity, character enhancement, and geodisaster mitigation. And finally, demonstrative projects such as the conservation and adaptive reuse of heritage buildings and investments into cultural assets. Together with Ting City, I believe it's a 3-year program committed in Kuala Kangsar. So I look forward to the panel today in our discussion. I think we offer a case study as to why financing climate adaptation efforts for a second-tier city is crucial for organizations that offer financial support. I hope that the conversations today will help provide much-needed inspiration and insights. And I would like to, on behalf of the Ting City Board of Directors and the Yayasan Hasanah Board of Trustees, congratulate and thank the team at Ting City, led by Cik Hamdan Abdul Majid, who's here, and your entire team for the great work that you are doing across the region, and as well as to the organizers of the Malaysia Pavilion and also the panelists today who's going to help support us with the conversations moving forward. So thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Shaira, for the insightful and inspiring opening remarks. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Ahila Ganesan, Senior Director of Think City, to deliver a short presentation. Let us give her a very warm welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, not sure if you can hear me. It's pretty loud outside. Want to give you a bit of background about Kuala Kangsar. I think Dato' Shahira has covered quite a bit of it. But there is some ways in which you need to understand what second-tier cities mean to a country. When we look at climate financing, generally what you find is that people do look at first-tier cities or primary cities, like say in Malaysia, you're going to look at Kuala Lumpur, you're going to look at Penang, Johor Bahru. That's where the money goes, right? And it's funneled. The problem with that scenario is that over time, you've got second-tier cities that are forgotten. And they're still important. There's still communities that are living there. In Kuala Kangsar, at the 2020 census, you had about 177,000 people who live there. So essentially, when we look at that, we can't ignore the fact that they have a climate resilience problem. They are a part of the greater economy. They are part of the GDP of the country. How do we then help them and make sure that we ensure that there is climate financing for these smaller cities that are often forgotten? In the work that we do in Think City, together with Yayasan Hasanah, we started with Kuala Kangsar. We were lucky enough to now take it forward, and with Yayasan Petronas, we've been looking at another city called Batu Pahat. For today, we're going to cover Kuala Kangsar. These are the components of the areas that we looked at. You have to start with an analysis, right? And the analysis of recognizing the gaps that are there. And that can be done only through analyzing the policies and strategies that are already in place, at which point you find the gaps and you try to fill them. We also wanted to look at the second component, which is assessing climate vulnerability, identifying the hazards that are there, exposure, impacts, and the adaptive capacity and gaps that are present. Then we move on to the third component, right? So you need to do the first two components in order to understand where the base is, in order to move to the third component, where you introduce the site-specific strategies. So it's very simple. In a roadmap that you have, you need to understand where you are, what is your baseline, where do you want to be, and then have the relevant interventions. Now, the way we look at it is that the beginning part, which is the baseline study, that's where it's very difficult to convince for financing to come in, to understand where the base is. We were lucky enough that Yayasan Hasanah took up the challenge, right, to fund us for that part. Now we are looking at other areas, other people who could possibly come and fund the interventions that we have in place. So what are the documents that we reviewed? Essentially, we reviewed a lot of documents. You need to look at the national, state, and local level documents. You also need to look at the reports that they have and the studies that there are. After you analyze what there is there, then we can understand what are the gaps in the policies existing. We don't forget the people. The communities are important. Sometimes what you think you know might not be what is the reality on the ground. So we have a very strong aspect of engaging with communities in Think City, and we take it forward with focus discussion groups to understand what is on the ground. And later I will show you how one of these focus discussion groups and engagement actually added to the data that we collected. When we look at the framework that we have, with Kuala Kangsar at the center, we also have the 5 areas of community, social, infrastructure, climate, and the economic factors that we have. With the local knowledge and institutional catalyst and evidence-led analysis, we can then look at the vulnerability, exposure, and hazards that we have. So this is sort of like a wider framework that we use to inform the way we look at things. So let's look at the flood map, right? So when we look at the flood map, the Department of Irrigation and Drainage, or JPS in Malaysia, has got data. So this is the data that was recorded. This is sort of the data that we gathered. Then upon communicating and engaging with the communities that are there, we realized that there are some areas that were not identified in the records. So that's where one of the areas in which engagement with the community is important, to understand where the gaps are. We also looked at land surface temperatures. This is study. This is data that is available, data that we collated, and we put it together and looked at how things are getting increasingly hot over the years. Then we try to put it all together. Again, everything that we do while we engage with the communities, it is still data-driven. So we looked at the areas, and we have a multi-criteria analysis that we have. And what we found was the climate risk assessment identified 3 of the most vulnerable areas in Kuala Kangsar. So these were the vulnerable areas, the ones in red. They were the most vulnerable. Subsequently, when we overlaid that, we also found that the most vulnerable areas are also areas with the highest population. So it's a double whammy, right? You are vulnerable, your population is also vulnerable. And this is where data comes into play, and it's important. And important to overlay data, right? So you've got your primary data centers, then you've got the data that comes in from the community, and then you need to overlay all of these data to reach a baseline of where we are at. So this is sort of the framework that we have. We look at the issues and challenges. We come up with the MCAs, right? The analysis that we have. We look at the strategies and priorities. And then we come up with the climate resilience framework for Kuala Kangsar. So it was an extensive process, which required many trips down to the ground. So in Bahasa, you would say turun padang, because you're not going to be able to solve issues of the community by doing desktop research. It needs to be engagement and continuous engagement. So this is what we looked at to formulate a plan for a climate resilience framework. There's never any 2 cities alike, never any 2 economies alike. So you need to be a very localized approach. While the science is there, there could be something that covers a broad spectrum of areas and is probably very easy to have a scientific intervention. It can't be without engaging with the community to understand the pain points. So the overall strategies and priorities that we ended up with were enhancing the climate resilience in urban planning and development, implementing a comprehensive disaster preparedness structure, developing, forecasting, and upgrading the early warning systems, implementing effective waste management systems, enhancing the royal town's landscape and public comfort and greater tourism. So as you can see, it's a process, and this is what we landed on. We have a baseline, we know what the next action plans are. And together with YH and possible future funding, we hope to take the studies further. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ahila, for the short presentations. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite our panelists to the stage for our next session. I would like to invite again Ms. Ahila Ganesan as our moderator for this session. Joining her on stage is Ms. Kamisa Ghazali, Senior Vice President of Iskandar Regional Development Authority, IRDA, Mr. Varat Pandey, Partner and Director, Boston Consulting Group, BCG Singapore, and Dr. Zian Fu Lu, Senior Adaptation Advisor, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB. Let's give a warm welcome to our moderators and speakers, ladies and gentlemen. The floor is yours, Ms. Ahila.
Thank you. Thank you. So, welcome everyone. I'm so happy that everybody could make it, and we thank you for your attendance today, and we are hoping to have a very good conversation about this. The panelists here today have a wide variety of experiences. We are looking at a multilateral development bank, someone who's worked with a government as well as now is a consultant with BCG, and of course we all know the kind of work that IRDA does in Johor. So I'm going to start off the conversation here because we are looking specifically at climate financing for second-tier cities. So perhaps I could start with Dr. Xian Fu. So, Doctor, I had the privilege of being in the plenary session yesterday, and your president had a very impressive, explanation of how your Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank has basically launched their inaugural Climate Action Plan, or CAP as they call it. And I listened to what he was saying, and it's very impressive, right? So you've got the 4 pillars that you're looking at, and I'm going to read it out from here because they're quite a mouthful here. Meeting differentiated member needs for a just approach on climate finance, taking a holistic approach, mobilizing capital, and facilitating technological innovation. When I look at your pillars, I do feel that it is very aligned with the work that we do in second-tier cities. So taking that into account, how can second-tier cities position themselves to receive the flows of capital, right? For action plans like this, and as you heard me explain about Kuala Kangsar, how would I go about it? How would Think City go about it, trying to look at possible funding, climate financing for Kuala Kangsar?
Yeah, thank you so much. And first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers and to give us the opportunity to come here to share with you some of the thoughts. And it's great to be on this panel, and I'm so impressed to see the work you have done in the Royal Town. This is really exemplary in terms of taking action, trying to introduce, the consideration of resilience into your citywide development. And I'm very impressed also that you took such notice of what our president said about our climate action plan. As you rightly said, we specified some of the high-level principles for financing operations going forward, up to 2030. So some of the headline principles, as you rightly said, has to be fit for purpose, which is really looking at, what our clients need. And first of all, the bank itself is really client-driven and demands-driven and the needs-driven. We don't tell our clients what you do. So we try to support and listen to your great ideas and what you have. I think this is a really good example of working together. After all, you are the ones with the most knowledge and knowing very well what is needed. And we came up with the solution financially and also the banks, not just, of course, financing is our bread and butter, but much more than just financial resources. We also have expertise, the knowledge and the know-how, and also partnerships. So we can leverage our convening power and to bring other partners with us to do the support. So come back to your question, how do we actually enable, some of the adaptation actions at the second-tier city level? Again, this is really down to the cities themselves. You are in the driver's seat. We are demand-driven, and the more the homework you've done, and the easier the partnership becomes. So I think very impressive. You have done components 1, 2, 3, and your program ended up with this resilience framework. But for me, I would like to challenge you to go a little bit further, extend that, converting your grand framework, those 5 components, into investment plan, sort of costed. And some of them may not require, sort of bank intervention, looking at your policy environment and some of the earlier pillars. But for the investment heavy and the capex heavy components, definitely if you wanted to get sort of support from the development banks, and the next step would be to cost them, to convert them into investment plan, and then we can look at them. So that's really the sort of the way I would say it. You know, the principles there is very much in line with our priorities.
I thank you for that. I mean, because that is the next steps that we are looking at, right? So bankable projects are always an important way to go, obviously, and an investment plan is definitely needed. And really thank you for highlighting that. And with that, Bharat, I actually wanted to talk to you because this kind of dovetails into the next part of the question, because you were at one point special advisor to India's Minister for Environment and Rural Development, right? And India, similar to Malaysia, as an Asian emerging economy, has got similar challenges in trying to get investment for financing climate adaptation and all that. So how do countries like Malaysia and India learn from the work done by these other countries and make sure that they do not reinvent the wheel? I mean, how do you allow locally led initiatives, like what we are trying to do, thrive and sort of come up with a bankable project, if you will, right? How do you have any examples if you could share?
Firstly, thank you for inviting me, and I think kudos to Think City and Yayasan Hasanah for supporting something like this. I think, as you said in your opening, Ahila, the second-tier cities are often forgotten because they are seen to be too small, or you know, rural gets a lot of attention because of agriculture, farmer, etc., and then the big cities get a lot of attention, but the middle layer gets forgotten. And in India, we've actually got a phrase for this, which is, it's called Rurban India, which is rural urban, because the reality increasingly in countries like of the global south is that the distinction between urban and rural is too simplistic. And we are seeing a continuum of habitations, right? All the way from big cities to medium cities, small cities, and then villages. In fact, in India, there are these census towns, and they're called census towns because when you do the census, population census, it emerges that they are highly populated, but because of historical reasons, administratively, they are seen as villages. So as a result, you end up having inappropriate governance models of what should really be cities are being governed as villages. And so there's a new movement around creating a new governance model for urban India with the idea that it should have the spirit of a village, but the facilities of a city. And so that idea is now being taken forward. And I think to your question on what does it take to bring these second-tier cities into prominence, and I think your case study hit on a lot of those answers. The way I like to see it is there are three important pillars that need to get focused, right? The focus first is just state capacity, and as you would have seen on your work in these cities, the technical capacity of a lot of the city administrators in smaller towns in the global south is not that great. And one of the interventions that you know, I was part of supporting earlier, which I thought was quite powerful, was to set up the office of a chief resilience officer for the smaller cities, with the idea that if somebody who comes with a resilience lens and some resilience expertise gets embedded within a town or city administration, can really champion the cause of resilience, can join the dots between different departments that often work in silos in city administration, and can be the rallying cry for project preparation on adaptation and resilience, and driving finance both from government, from private sector, and from multilaterals into town. So the idea of the office of a chief resilience officer as a way to increase the capacity of second-tier cities to be much more resilient. So that's number one. The second I would say is city finance. The second-tier cities often struggle with mobilizing finance. They are quite dependent on the federal or the state government for finances. They have very limited own sources of finance, right? And one of the biggest challenges, simple things like, at least in the Indian context we saw, don't even have good double entry accounting. And if you don't have good double entry accounting, your ability to seek finance from government, from private sector, from international sources gets severely limited. So just simple interventions like helping local governments of second-tier cities with developing double entry accounting, with putting together a digital platform where their fiscal data can be stored and shared with higher levels of government, can be quite important to start the journey of unlocking finance, both from the governments, whether it is also raising resilience financing from people like AIIB and international markets. So finance and being prepared to take advantage of resilience finance, I think, is the second pillar. And then the third pillar, of course, is citizen engagement, and you touched on this in your presentation. But how do we make citizens of these cities genuine stakeholders in city resilience planning, right? It's more than just saying we will do some public consultation or we will do a few things like that. Can you make them really integral part of both the planning process as well as the accountability to what you commit to them, right? And I think there are some good examples as well on how we can do that, but I would be the first to admit that this particular pillar on citizen engagement is very much a work in progress and we need to work on. So I think these three pillars of improving the capacity of second-tier cities, state capacity, finance, getting them ready to basic things like financial reporting so that they can become contenders to raise finance from outside. And the third, innovative ways of citizen engagement are quite important. And I think if we can lay the templates for these three things, that could be a great way to scale up the kind of work you've done here and make it happen in the hundreds and thousands of such second-tier cities in the global south.
Thank you, Varit. I really love what you said, which is the spirit of a village, but facilities of a city. And then I'm going to throw a curveball to Puan Kamisa from IRDA, because again, with Iskandar development, right? So it's by no means a village, but I do believe that there is a certain level of spirit of a village, right? And you still have the facilities of a city. So how would you then, based on what Varit said, right? How would you then tie it back to the way Iskandar is run? In terms of the governance, like the second part of what he was saying, in terms of the governance, how would we try to engage with the communities and try to build that resilience and accountability and wanting to be a part of the solution, not just, talking about the problems?
Well, thank you, Ahila. I guess that's a lot, somehow, what we have been doing in Iskandar, Malaysia. Well, I think our panels have touched a lot, but I guess I just want to start again before I move into that. I think what you are doing is what we've been through before. The planning document is important, and then mainstreaming some of the initiatives, some of the projects to a high-level document is important. At the state level, at the national level alignment, because by end of the day, when it comes to financing of a project, if it's government project, you need to get it from public funds, you got to have sort of like a mandate. So these are the things that we've been through all this while. And then at the same time, I think we are lucky when we start our initiatives in terms of low carbon. We have we actually look for, a lot of opportunity, and under SATRAPs, we get JICA and IJAS assist us in the full documentation of our low carbon blueprints. And that goes to the second-tier city, because we also have action plan for every PBT under Iskandar, Malaysia. Well, and as a member of GCOM, you touch on capacity building. We leverage on this platform to get, the capacity building done, not only to people in Iskandar, Malaysia, but also to the smaller cities, the second-tier cities, so that they understand and they know how to address the problem that they are facing. And I guess in a lot of what we are doing in Iskandar Malaysia is all about community. Community need to understand. Investment on adaptation is so big. If you want to wait for the money, to come, then we will not start at all. So we said, let's just do it with community, do what we can do. All right? So in a lot of projects that we do, our community is at the forefront. So that's why we have successful projects like the Green Community Carbon Reduction Program, the Iskandar Malaysia Eco Life Challenge, which actually started at the Iskandar Malaysia level, but then rolled out for the whole state of Johor. So it has been very successful. And we also work in collaboration with international parties to actually, improve or accelerate environmental education. And I guess this is important because community now understand. And when we actually did our program in terms of Eco Life Challenge, it's all just young children, very exciting. But there are about 100,000 of them, but the outreach is 500,000 because they bring their parents, their family, their communities, to come together in some of the initiative or work that they do. So it's actually very impressive. And we can see that, in terms of mindset change, it have moved gradually. And we can also see the second-tier city participating more, meaning that they take responsibility and ownership on what they are doing. Although sometimes in a lot of programs, they don't give you money because they don't have much, but they give you, in kind so that you can, make it big, make big impact out of, whatever initiative that we have.
Thank you. I mean, that's a very interesting perspective that you have, where you're looking at essentially what you're saying is you're starting with the bigger cities and it sort of impacts the smaller cities, and not just in terms of the benefits, but also the mindset change that happens as well, right? So that's an interesting way of looking at it. But Dr. Xianfu, I would like to go back to you, right? And in that, I do want to know, when we look, because you did talk about investability and being bankable, and obviously this will obviously be something where you have de-risked to a certain extent. So how do you, especially second-tier cities, right, because they don't have the population, or possibly they don't have the business capacity or the inflow of funds or the economic viability as much as you would have in a capital city, how would they reduce their financing risk, right, and improve their credit worthiness, if you will, right, to become more attractive in receiving investments? Because not everybody is keen on second-tier cities, because they do see it as a city that population is smaller, your GDP is smaller, so how do you de-risk that?
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend I can answer this question in the next couple of minutes. This is a really a perennial challenge I think we all have to face. And what I could say is that, my fellow panelists already said many good points, is we need to, to build the track records, the thing you mentioned, to build the accounting system. So once we start to build our records of success, we can then, showcase, we did this and it worked, and we can do more. So for us, the AIIB, when we go and in discussions with the clients, how we support, we look at these things. And as a development bank, we are not a commercial bank, so we do consider our value addition in terms of what our role is in the transaction. So if we can make it a little bit easier, for the city, for example, if by us getting involved, would crowd in, would attract other commercial investors, we would happily do that. But we will work very closely with the client to make sure what we put together will have social environmental benefits. For example, not just building some shiny new buildings and bridges. So we wanted to see a bit value addition. So these kind of things, exactly if our involvement to help de-risk some of the the required investments to go forward, we would definitely do that. But then from the client's side, what we can do is to really support you also to build the track record, the financial discipline, fiscal discipline, and the sound governance, you already touched on. And a lot of that is also to do with, creating the coherent community, stakeholders' involvement. If we feel the community actually wants something done very badly and passionately, and that is another tick. And so these are all, quite practical things we can take into account. It's not rocket science, when we come to assess the risks. And another quite important thing to bear in mind is we talk about, Chief Resilience Officer. So now the rating agencies, we talk about the credit worthiness. Now the resilience has come into the equation. So when they look at the credit rating of any entity, including municipal government, and so this is coming gradually to the equation, and of course we have some way to go in terms of metrics and indicators, how do we measure resilience and so on, but this is a very much active sort of area of work being carried out.
Thank you so much. We are running out of time, and I would like to have this conversation further as we exit this place. But any last thoughts in terms of looking at second-tier cities and being at COP for the past few days, or even in previous COPs? What gets you hopeful that there is a possibility to move forward in trying to get climate finance to second-tier cities? Bharat, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, I'll just build on some of the thoughts from my fellow panelists and say that, as I see it, there are two layers of things we have to do. One is what is almost like the baseline or the basics we have to get right. Second-tier cities, they have to do double entry accounting. They have to be able to transparently share that data. They have to start doing resilience metrics or resilience assessments. All of that stuff is now becoming table stakes. Yeah. And then on top of that, you need to create a very bespoke portfolio of fundable projects. Yes. Which is where it requires a lot of help, technical assistance, etc. Right? Yeah. Because, and then, we've helped do this in many cities now, where you create a large portfolio of projects. Then you have to prioritize those projects based on some sense of social rate of return. And then for the ones that come top on that social rate of return, you want to develop a business plan or a funding plan, and then go to people like AIIB or others to say, hey, these might be interesting for you to fund. So the base stuff everybody has to do, and then build on it by doing bespoke project plans for high priority, high social return investment. And to end on your point on what gives me hope, I think in this COP you will see a lot of conversations on resources that are available to cities today, which can speed up this process, both from the multilateral development banks, but also from platforms like C40 and the Resilient Cities Network and so on. I think today they are creating a lot of useful resources, whether it's training programs, whether it's templates, whether it's playbooks. And I know, Ahila, you and some of us are going to launch something interesting tomorrow in that direction. Yes, so I think that's what gives me hope. Thank you, Bharat. And Dr. Shamfu?
Yes, I think I will go along with that. And what I see is there's a lot of acknowledgement of the critical importance of action at all levels. I mean, it is in the Paris Agreement. And what I see is, if we do our homework, we build the project pipeline, build the case, and you also sort out the, the governance and the discipline inside. I think there will be a lot of people willing to finance. And people are ready, and the political case has been made very clearly, and all the banks are ready to support adaptation resilience.
Puan Kamisa?
Well, I agree with our fellow panelists, because that's what we've been through. I guess, you know, having a baseline is true, is correct, because you know you have to prioritize. Getting the right governance is also important, because the second tier city need the support in terms of policy, in terms of, you know, the driving force behind them. So that type of support is important. And I guess when we have prioritization, for us, we are being very proactive in our approach, right? We don't wait for funding to come from government. We look for it. We look for it. I guess second tier city have got to do the same. Look for it. And there are many platforms like, you know, if we talk about GCOM have been helping a lot of second tier cities everywhere in the world, you see. So I think even in Johor, cities like, second tier cities like Segamai, Muar, they already have their own climate action plan, where it helps them to prioritize, you know, what they need to do and what they have to deliver. So I guess, you know, being proactiveness from the points of the second tier city points of view is important. And I tend to agree. Probably you need that resilient officer, I guess, because not everyone have that capacity, and capacity is also important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I thank our panel to being here, and I'd like to leave you all with one of the things that I thought was fantastic about the panel today. Everybody has a diverse view, and let's be honest, it is true. We need to have a spirit of a village in a second-tier city, but have the facilities of a city. So I do thank you for being here, and I thank the audience for being here as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our moderator and speaker for the comprehensive and insightful session. Let's give them a round of applause again, ladies and gentlemen. I would now like to invite our moderator and speaker and our distinguished guests to the center stage for photo opportunities. I'd like to invite Datuk and our distinguished guests bersama